Apache woman said, "I'm nobody's first choice." The rancher said, "You're my only choice." The sun had barely risen over the vast open plains when the rancher stepped out of his small farmhouse. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of grass and earth, a smell he had grown up with and had learned to love over the years. His hands were rough from years of work with the soil, the horses, and the fences that marked the borders of his land. Life on the ranch was never easy, but it was honest, predictable, and satisfying in ways that a city life could never offer. Across town, the Apache woman was also starting her day, though hers was filled with a different kind of routine. She had grown up learning the value of independence, of standing on her own 2 feet. Her family had taught her resilience, but life had also given her lessons in loneliness and being overlooked. People often underestimated her or assumed she wasn't someone they should notice. For years she had believed that she was nobody's first choice. She had tried not to let it bother her, convincing herself that being practical, strong, and self-sufficient was enough. But deep down, the ache of being unseen lingered. Their paths were destined to cross in a way neither could predict. That morning, the town's small market was alive with activity. Farmers unloaded crates of fresh vegetables. Bakers displayed their bread and pastries, and the chatter of neighbors filled the air. The rancher walked slowly through the market, nodding at familiar faces, checking on the quality of goods he was considering buying. He preferred to buy locally, from people he trusted, people who worked hard like he did. The Apache woman was there to sell some handmade crafts she had been working on for months. She had always enjoyed creating things with her hands, jewelry, small carvings, and leather goods, and she took pride in her work. Today she had arranged them neatly on a small table under the shade of a canvas umbrella, hoping that someone would notice the care and detail she had put into each piece. It was the rancher who first paused at her table, drawn not only by the beautiful work but by something about her presence. She moved with quiet confidence, yet there was a softness in her expression that spoke of stories untold. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and the rancher felt an unexpected pull. It was as if he had seen her before in a dream, though he knew that was impossible. She, on the other hand, noticed his gaze but quickly looked away, reminding herself that strangers often did not mean well. Still, there was something different about him, something steady, calm, and sincere. "Good morning," he said finally, his voice deep but gentle. "These are beautiful? Did you make them yourself?" "Yes," she replied, her voice soft but careful. "I do this on the side. It helps me keep busy." There was a pause, as if she wanted to say more but held herself back. Her eyes flicked to the ground for a moment before returning to him. "I can see the effort," the rancher said with a small smile. "You have talent. Not everyone notices the little details like this." The compliment caught her off guard. She was used to people either ignoring her or assuming her work was ordinary. This man, however, seemed genuinely interested, not just in her crafts, but in her as the person who made them. For a moment, she allowed herself to relax, though a part of her whispered caution. As the morning went on, more people came and went from the market. The rancher found reasons to linger near her table, asking about the materials she used and how she learned her craft. She answered politely, still guarded, but gradually the conversation became easier. She began to notice small things about him, the way his hands moved, strong but careful, the way he listened more than he spoke, the way his eyes, though tired from work, seemed to hold warmth and kindness. By the time the sun reached its peak, they had shared stories about their lives. He spoke of the ranch, of early mornings and long days, and how satisfying it was to see the land thrive under his care. She spoke of her upbringing, the lessons her family had taught her, and the quiet strength she had learned to carry. It was not a deep confession, but enough to hint at their past struggles and triumphs. Despite her natural caution, she found herself enjoying the conversation. It was different from anything she had experienced in a long time. She felt seen, truly seen, in a way that was unfamiliar but comforting. Yet, even as she smiled, a shadow lingered in her mind, the fear that this was just a fleeting moment, and that she would soon be left with the ache of disappointment once more. The rancher, for his part, could not ignore the sense of admiration growing within him. He had met many people in his life, but rarely had someone struck him with such quiet strength and sincerity. He noticed the way she carried herself, the determination behind her eyes, and the gentle honesty in her words. It was not just attraction. It was respect, deep and instinctive. As the market began to wind down, the woman started packing up her crafts, preparing to leave. The rancher hesitated, not wanting the day to end without asking her something important. "Would you maybe like to come by the ranch sometime? I could show you around, and you could meet the horses. I think you'd like it." She paused, surprised by the invitation. It was unexpected, almost bold, and yet there was nothing aggressive in his tone. She sensed sincerity in his words, and for a fleeting moment, the fear that had always held her back softened. Maybe, she replied cautiously, unsure whether she could trust her own feelings. I understand, he said gently. No pressure. Just thought it might be nice. You're welcome any time. As she walked away from the market, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She had not expected this encounter to affect her so strongly. Here was a man who seemed to see her, not just her exterior, not just her crafts, but... And yet the old voice in her head whispered doubts. I'm nobody's first choice. Why would he choose me? Meanwhile, the rancher watched her walk away, feeling a strange certainty settle in his chest. There was something about her that he could not ignore. Something about her presence, her strength, and her quiet vulnerability made him want to know more, to be someone she could rely on. For the first time in a long while, he felt a connection that went beyond casual interest. Days passed, and though they did not see each other immediately again, the memory of that morning lingered for both of them. She found herself thinking about his gentle smile, his patient questions, and the way he had acknowledged her work with genuine appreciation. She tried to push the thoughts aside, reminding herself that life rarely gave second chances, and she had been disappointed too many times before. The rancher, too, found his thoughts returning to her. He considered driving by her neighborhood, leaving a note, or finding an excuse to see her again. But he knew that patience was important. He had spent his life understanding the value of time, of letting things grow naturally. He could not rush something that felt so delicate and important. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with hues of orange and pink, she found herself walking near the edge of the ranch. She had been out for a long walk, letting her thoughts wander, when she noticed the familiar outline of a figure by the fence. The rancher was checking the cattle, his silhouette strong against the fading light. For reasons she could not explain, she stopped and watched. There was a calmness about him, a steadiness that contrasted sharply with the chaos she often felt inside. When he finally noticed her, he smiled, a small, genuine smile that seemed to carry warmth even in the cooling evening air. "Evening," he called out. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" "Yes," she replied, her voice soft. "It's peaceful." He nodded, leaning against the fence. "I was just thinking about the market the other day, about your crafts. You really have a gift. It's rare to see someone who puts so much care into what they do." Her heart skipped a beat. Compliments had always been fleeting, often empty, but his words felt anchored in truth. She wanted to trust him, to believe that he meant what he said, and for a moment she allowed herself to do just that. "I thank you," she murmured. "Most people don't notice, or they assume it's nothing." He shook his head. "Not me. I notice, and I think more people should." His gaze held hers, steady and unwavering. "You deserve to be seen, to be appreciated for who you are." They were not dramatic, not over the top, just simple, honest truth. For a moment, the walls she had built around herself felt less solid, less necessary. She wanted to believe him, to believe that someone could see her as more than just the past mistakes, the overlooked efforts, the invisible choices others had made. As night fell, they stood in quiet companionship, two souls connected by something unspoken but profoundly real. Neither of them rushed, neither of them forced anything. They simply existed in that shared moment, feeling the weight of their own pasts and the gentle hope of what might come. And though neither said it aloud, both knew that this was the beginning of something meaningful, a journey neither could yet define, but one that promised to challenge their fears, heal old wounds, and perhaps, finally show the Apache woman that she was somebody's first choice after all. The days following their first meeting at the market carried a quiet tension in the Apache woman's heart. She found herself thinking about the rancher more than she cared to admit. His presence lingered in her mind like the warmth of the sun on a cold morning, gentle, steady, impossible to ignore. And yet, old habits of caution whispered constantly in her ear. "People let you down. You are nobody's first choice." Those words repeated silently made her hesitant to allow herself hope. Meanwhile, the rancher could not push her from his thoughts either. He found himself walking past the market at odd hours, telling himself it was just curiosity, yet he secretly hoped to see her again. Her crafts, her quiet strength, the way she carried herself, all of it had left an impression that he could not ignore. Unlike many fleeting attractions he had felt in the past, this one was different. He felt a pull, a responsibility almost, to show her that she was seen and valued. A week later their paths crossed again, though neither had planned it. The rancher was working on repairing a fence near the edge of the property, and she was passing by, carrying a small basket of herbs she had collected from her garden. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows across the land, and for a moment the world seemed to pause as they noticed each other. "Hello," he called, straightening and wiping his hands on a cloth. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Hello," she replied cautiously, gripping the basket a little tighter. "I just needed some air." He nodded, sensing her unease, but he did not press. Instead, he gestured toward the fence he was repairing. "Want to help? Or at least watch?" he asked with a faint smile. There was no mockery in his tone, only an offer of companionship, simple and unassuming. For a moment she hesitated, but curiosity won. She approached slowly, setting her basket down on a nearby rock. "I've never really worked on fences before," she admitted. "That's fine," he said warmly. "It's simple work, and I'll show you. You might even find it satisfying." She smiled faintly, surprised at his patience. As they worked together, repairing the old wooden slats, she noticed small things about him, how careful he was with each piece of wood, how he guided her hand gently when she fumbled, and how he never made her feel incapable. There was the first time in a long while she had felt comfortable learning from someone who genuinely wanted her to succeed. The rancher, in turn, noticed her determination. She was cautious, yes, but she was quick to adapt, careful with her movements and willing to listen. He admired the way she approached even simple tasks with thoughtfulness. As the hours passed, they exchanged stories about their lives, their families, and the paths that had led them here. The Apache woman spoke of her childhood in the reservation, of lessons taught by her elders, and of the quiet strength she had developed in solitude. The rancher shared tales of life on the ranch, of early mornings and long days, of successes and failures, all with a humility that made her respect him even more. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting golden light across the fields, a sense of ease settled between them. The walls that had guarded the Apache woman's heart began to soften, though she was careful not to let them fall completely. She felt a spark of connection, a sense that perhaps for the first time someone truly understood her. Yet the fear of disappointment lingered, like a shadow. Days turned into weeks, and their interactions became more frequent. They met at the market, worked on the ranch together, and occasionally shared long walks through the open fields. Each meeting strengthened their bond, though neither dared to speak of feelings openly. The Apache woman was still wary, afraid that her past experiences would repeat themselves. She had been overlooked too many times, dismissed too often, and she did not want to set herself up for heartbreak. The rancher, however, was patient. He understood her hesitations and respected them. He never rushed, never demanded, but he consistently showed her through actions what his words sometimes could not convey. Whether it was helping her carry a heavy load, bringing fresh water during a hot day, or simply listening without judgment, he made it clear that he valued her presence in his life. One afternoon, as they sat beneath the shade of a large oak tree, the Apache woman finally spoke more freely. She had been quiet for some time, watching the sunlight filter through the leaves, listening to the gentle rustle of the wind. "Do you ever feel like people don't see who you really are?" she asked softly, her voice almost lost in the breeze. He looked at her, sensing the weight behind her question. "Yes," he admitted. "I think everyone feels that way sometimes." "But it doesn't mean no one will ever see you," she sighed, a mixture of relief and lingering doubt. "Most people, they just see what they want to see. And if you don't fit that, well, you're invisible." "I don't see you like that," he said firmly. "I see you, all of you. The strength, the patience, the care you put into everything you do. You're remarkable." Her heart fluttered at his words. Compliments had always been fleeting, often empty, but his were different. They were sincere, grounded in observation and respect. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that someone could see her for who she truly was, not for what she could offer, but for her essence. They shared dreams, fears, and small secrets that had never been voiced to anyone else. The rancher learned of the loneliness she had endured, the quiet battles she had fought, and the resilience that had carried her through difficult times. The Apache woman learned of his own struggles, the pressure of maintaining the ranch, the loneliness that often came with living in such a remote area, and the quiet yearning for companionship that he rarely spoke of. Despite the growing closeness, there were moments of tension. Friends and family occasionally questioned their interactions, wondering why she spent time with a rancher whose life was so different from hers. She herself struggled with doubt, asking if she could truly trust someone to value her as she was. There were moments when old fears resurfaced, threatening to undo the fragile trust that had begun to form. Yet each time doubt crept in, The rancher responded not with words alone, but with consistent actions. He did not pressure her or demand explanations. He simply remained steady, reliable, and present. Slowly, she began to let go of some of her fears, learning that trust could be built one small step at a time. One evening, as they sat watching the sun set over the distant hills, the Apache woman finally allowed herself to voice a thought she had been holding back. "I've always felt like I'm nobody's first choice," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The rancher turned to her, his expression calm but intent. "You're wrong," he said gently. "You are my only choice. And if you let me, I want to show you every day that you are seen, appreciated, and valued. You don't have to be anyone else's first choice. You are mine." Her breath caught. The words were simple, yet they carried a weight she had never imagined hearing. She wanted to believe them, to trust that they were true, but old habits of caution still lingered. "It's hard to believe," she murmured, her eyes on the fading sunlight. "I know," he replied softly. "I understand, but I am willing to wait. To show you, not just with words, but with everything I do, that you are truly my choice." For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was someone who could see her, truly see her, and choose her, not out of convenience or fleeting attraction, but because she mattered to them in every way. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet, meaningful moments. They worked together, shared meals, and explored the land around the ranch. Each interaction strengthened the bond that was forming, though neither rushed the process. The Apache woman learned to appreciate the patience and care the rancher showed, while he admired her strength, intelligence, and the warmth she had quietly nurtured within herself despite the hardships she had faced. Their connection was not marked by grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but by simple, consistent acts of kindness. Whether it was the rancher noticing her favorite tea in the local store and bringing it to her, or the Apache woman taking the time to prepare a small meal for him after a long day of work, their actions spoke louder than any words could. And so, as Part 2 drew to a close, the foundation of trust and affection was firmly laid. Both knew the journey ahead would not be without challenges. Old fears, societal expectations, and personal doubts would all test them. Yet, for the first time, the Apache woman allowed herself to imagine a future where she was chosen, valued, and loved. And the rancher, steadfast and unwavering, was ready to show her, day by day, that she was indeed his only choice. The calm rhythm of their growing friendship was soon tested. Life, as it often did, had a way of reminding them that trust and connection were fragile, especially for someone who had been hurt before. The Apache woman had begun to allow herself moments of happiness, laughing at small jokes the rancher made, sharing stories she had never told anyone, feeling a comfort she had not known in years. But old fears lingered like shadows, whispering that she might be overlooked again, or that someone as steady and kind as the rancher could not truly choose her over all else. It started with a misunderstanding, small at first, but enough to unsettle her. One morning while the rancher was out with the horses, she visited a local store to pick up supplies. She overheard someone speaking about her in a dismissive tone, implying that she was simply passing time with the rancher, that he might lose interest or never really be serious. The words stung, though she tried to push them aside. "Do people ever truly see me?" The thought nagged at her, and her heart tightened. That afternoon, when she met the rancher again at the market, she was quieter than usual, cautious, withdrawn. He noticed immediately. His sharp eyes missed nothing. The subtle stiffness in her posture, the faint shadow behind her smile. "Something's wrong," he said gently, leaning against her table. "Talk to me." Finally, she whispered, I heard something today. People. They say I'm not serious for you, that you might leave me for someone else." The rancher's expression softened, and he reached out, placing a steady hand on hers. "Don't listen to that," he said firmly. "I choose you. Not because of anyone else, not because of what others think. You are my choice, and nothing you hear will change that." Her heart fluttered, but doubt remained. Years of disappointment had taught her caution. She wanted to believe him, but a part of her was still bracing for the pain of rejection she feared might come. Days later, the rancher decided that action, not words, would show her his sincerity. He invited her to spend the day at the ranch, helping him with chores, showing her the routines of his life, and letting her see the care he put into everything he loved. She accepted, tentative but curious. The morning was bright and cool, the kind of crispness that made the air feel alive. As they worked side by side mending fences, feeding horses and checking the cattle, a quiet intimacy grew. Each gesture, each shared task became a small thread weaving their lives closer together. She began to see the ranch as a place of safety, a place where she could be herself without judgment. Yet the challenge was never far away. That evening, as they walked along a path near the river that ran through the ranch, a small accident occurred. One of the horses spooked, running wildly toward the water. The Apache woman froze, unsure what to do, but the rancher acted instantly, stepping between her and the animal, calming it with a firm but gentle voice. In the chaos, she realized how much he cared, not just for the animals, but for her. He would protect her, guide her, and stand beside her when danger came. As the horse finally calmed and the tension subsided, she found herself trembling, not from fear alone, but from a realization she had been avoiding. She had started to care for him deeply, and the thought of losing him, of being hurt again, terrified her. The rancher, noticing her quietness, asked softly, "Are you okay?" She nodded, though her eyes glistened. I think I am. It's just I'm not used to feeling safe or chosen." "You are safe," he said firmly. "And you are chosen. Every single day I choose you. That hasn't changed, and it won't." Even as she tried to absorb his words, doubts lingered. Could she truly let someone in, after all the times she had been overlooked? Could she trust that he meant every word, every action? These questions gnawed at her, quietly but persistently. Then came a more serious test, one neither of them could have predicted. A storm swept through the area overnight, fierce and unrelenting. By morning, part of the ranch was damaged. The fence they had mended together had been torn down, and some of the cattle had wandered into a neighboring field. The Apache woman rushed to the ranch, fearing for the animals and for the rancher who had stayed behind during the storm to secure the property. When she arrived, she found him drenched and exhausted, but focused entirely on the safety of his animals. Without hesitation, she joined him, helping to round up the cattle and repair the fence. The work was grueling, the mud sticky and heavy, but side by side they moved with a rhythm that spoke of growing trust and partnership. As they paused to catch their breath, both covered in mud and sweat, she looked at him with a mixture of awe and gratitude. You didn't have to stay out here in the storm," she said softly. He shook his head, a tired but genuine smile on his face. "I didn't. But I care about this land, and I care about you. I can handle the work, but I can't handle seeing either of you in danger." Her heart warmed at his words, and in that moment she realized that the choice he had made was not just in words, it was in every action, every decision, every moment of care he had shown her. As the storm cleared and the sun broke through the clouds, they stood together looking over the fields and the repaired fence. The land was messy and torn, but it was still theirs. And so were they, in a way that had taken time, patience, and small acts of devotion to realize. The next challenge came not from nature, but from human judgment. A relative of the Apache woman came to visit, expressing concern over her spending time with the rancher. They questioned his intentions, implying that he might leave her, or that she should be careful about trusting someone so different from her world. Old fears stirred within her. She wanted to believe in what they had, but the voice of caution was loud and insistent. Seeing her struggle, the rancher did not respond with anger or defensiveness. Instead, he simply reaffirmed his commitment, calmly stating that his feelings were genuine and that he was not swayed by others' opinions. He invited her to sit with him quietly, to breathe, and to consider what she truly felt rather than what others thought she should feel. It was in these moments that the Apache woman began to understand the depth of his care. He did not try to rush her, did not push her into declarations of love or commitment. Instead, he allowed her to come to her own conclusions, to trust her own heart, while he remained a steady presence by her side. One evening, after a particularly long day of repairs and tending to the land, they sat by the fire outside the ranch house. The air was cool, and the stars began to twinkle overhead. She finally spoke what had been on her mind for weeks. "I want to trust you," she admitted, "but it's hard. I've been hurt before, overlooked before. I'm scared that one day you might choose someone else." He took her hand in his, holding it firmly but gently. "I can't promise that life will be without challenges, but I can promise that I will choose you every day. You don't have to fear being overlooked, because in my eyes, you are all that matters. You are my choice, today and tomorrow, and as long as I live." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of relief and recognition. For the first time, she truly felt seen and valued, not for what she could do, but for who she was. The walls she had built around her heart were cracking piece by piece, replaced with a cautious but growing hope. The storm, the doubts, and the external pressures had tested them, but instead of breaking their bond, these challenges had strengthened it. They had learned to communicate, to support one another, and to see beyond past fears and societal expectations. And as they sat together under the open sky, the Apache woman realized that she had begun to believe in the rancher's words. She was not nobody's first choice. She was his only choice, and he was showing her every day that she mattered. By the time Part 3 drew to a close, both of them had been tested, challenged, and strengthened. The Apache woman had faced her deepest fears, confronting doubts that had lingered for years. The rancher had proven, through patience, persistence, and unwavering care, that his words were more than promises. They were actions, lived and demonstrated with sincerity. And though they knew more challenges awaited them in life, they were ready to face them together. Their bond had moved beyond attraction or casual friendship. It had become a partnership built on trust, respect, and the profound understanding that each had found in the other something rare, precious, and unshakable. The weeks after the storm passed felt different for both of them. Something had quietly shifted. The Apache woman no longer carried the same heavy hesitation in her steps when she came to the ranch. The rancher, too, seemed more relaxed, as if he trusted that she would not suddenly disappear from his life. Still, neither of them rushed things. They both understood that real trust grows slowly, like crops in a field. Steady care, patience, and time were needed. The ranch returned to its usual rhythm. Early mornings, long afternoons of work, quiet evenings watching the sky change colors. She began spending more time there, sometimes helping with chores, sometimes simply sitting nearby while he worked. At first she worried she might be in the way, but he always made her feel welcome. He never treated her like an outsider. Instead, he acted as though she naturally belonged. One evening, as they repaired a wooden gate together, she caught herself laughing freely at one of his simple jokes. The sound surprised her. It had been a long time since laughter had come so easily. She realized that being around him had started to soften the guarded parts of her heart. "I like hearing you laugh," he said quietly. "It means you feel comfortable." She looked down for a moment before answering. "I do feel comfortable, more than I expected." That admission, though small, meant a lot to both of them. As days passed, the Apache woman began sharing more about her life, not just surface stories, but deeper memories. She spoke about times when she felt invisible, when people overlooked her efforts or made assumptions about her without really knowing her. She spoke about how those experiences slowly built the belief that she would never truly be someone's first choice. The rancher listened without interrupting. He never tried to rush her or fix everything with quick words. Instead, he gave her something she had rarely received before, full attention without judgment. "You don't have to carry those old beliefs forever," he told her one night while they sat near a small fire outside. "People in your past may not have seen you clearly."
That doesn't mean everyone will be the same.
"I'm starting to see that." There were still moments when doubt crept in. Sometimes she would grow quiet for no obvious reason. Sometimes she worried that she was depending too much on him. But instead of pulling away completely like she once might have done, she now talked about those fears openly. That openness became one of the strongest parts of their bond. The rancher also began sharing more about himself. He spoke about the loneliness that sometimes came with ranch life. He had friends and neighbors, but deep companionship had always been missing. Work filled most of his days, and though he loved the land, he had quietly hoped for someone to share life with. "I didn't expect it to be you," he admitted once, smiling gently. "But I'm glad it is." She smiled back, her eyes softer than before. A significant moment came when the town held its annual community gathering. It was a simple event. Food, music, local crafts, neighbors spending time together. In the past, the Apache woman often attended briefly and then left early, feeling out of place. This time was different. The rancher asked if she would go with him. At first, she hesitated. Public spaces sometimes triggered her old insecurities. But something inside told her it was time to step forward instead of holding back. They arrived together just before sunset. The warm lights strung across the open area gave everything a welcoming glow. People greeted the rancher warmly, and many greeted her too. Some were curious, some friendly, but overall the atmosphere was kind. What surprised her most was how, naturally, the rancher included her in conversations. He never introduced her as an afterthought. He spoke with quiet pride, making it clear she mattered in his life. For the first time in years, she did not feel invisible in a crowd. Later that evening, as they stood slightly apart from the noise, she turned to him. "This is new for me," she said softly. "I usually feel like I don't belong in places like this." "You belong wherever you choose to be," he replied, "especially beside me." As the months continued, their partnership became more visible. She started helping regularly at the ranch, not out of obligation but because she genuinely enjoyed it. She discovered peace in the routines, feeding animals, organizing supplies, even simple tasks like cleaning tools. The land that once felt foreign now felt familiar. Friends began noticing the change in her. She carried herself with more confidence. Her smile appeared more often. Even her craftwork reflected it. Brighter designs, more intricate details, a quiet joy woven into each piece. The rancher noticed, too. He admired not only her creativity but her resilience. She had not suddenly become fearless. Rather, she had learned to move forward despite fear. That strength impressed him more than anything. One evening, while watching the sunset over the fields, she spoke words that once would have been impossible for her. "I finally believe you," she said, "that I'm not just someone passing through your life, that I'm actually your choice." He smiled, relief visible in his expression. "You always were." There was no dramatic moment, no grand gesture, just quiet understanding. And somehow that simplicity made it even more meaningful. Their relationship continued growing naturally. They faced ordinary challenges, busy seasons, financial worries, unexpected repairs on the ranch, but they approached them as a team. Each challenge strengthened their sense of partnership instead of weakening it. The Apache woman also reconnected more deeply with her own community. Instead of feeling caught between two worlds, she began blending them. She shared traditions, stories, and skills with the rancher, while also bringing new experiences back to her family. The exchange created mutual respect rather than distance. Through all of it, one thing became clear to her. Being chosen did not mean losing independence. It meant sharing strength, supporting each other, and allowing vulnerability without fear. Under a sky full of stars, she reflected on how far she had come. There had been a time when she believed she would always stand on the sidelines of life, never fully seen. Now she stood beside someone who valued her completely. "I used to think I was nobody's first choice," she said quietly. He looked at her, steady as always. "You are always worthy of being someone's first choice. I just happened to be the one lucky enough to see it." Tears filled her eyes, but they were peaceful tears. Not sadness, not fear, simply the release of years of doubt finally fading. Life did not suddenly become perfect. No life ever does. But it became balanced, shared, hopeful. They built routines together, morning coffee before chores, evening walks along the fence line, quiet conversations that needed no audience. These small, consistent moments formed the true heart of their connection. Over time, people around them stopped questioning their bond. Instead, they began seeing what had always been there. Two individuals supporting each other with honesty, patience, and care. And for the Apache woman, the biggest transformation happened internally. She no longer introduced herself with hesitation. She no longer assumed she would be overlooked. She carried quiet confidence, knowing her value did not depend on others' approval. The rancher, meanwhile, found the companionship he had quietly hoped for. The ranch no longer felt solitary. Every sunrise and sunset seemed richer when shared. Their story did not end with a dramatic conclusion. Instead, it settled into something more meaningful, a steady, enduring partnership built on respect, trust, and genuine choice. She was someone chosen, appreciated, and deeply valued, and he remained consistent in the simple promise he had made from the beginning, not through grand words, but through daily actions. She had once said she was nobody's first choice. Now she knew without doubt that she was his only choice.